merciful. So, hello everyone. I had a feeling to record a lecture today, but the depth of today was very different. And my phone also has 19% battery. I guess I'm gonna make this quick. Today I had a unique thought, and I wondered what to do with this thought, and I thought of sharing it and seeing perhaps there's others, or there could be different views shared by others around the world on this. But today I had left some items I'd used on my couch, like some bottle of water or something. I pretty much I'd used something and hadn't tidied it up right after, and I came back home and saw this stuff just lying there, and for a second this idea arose to me that if I had never used the stuff, for example, like a plate of food or something, I didn't clean it right after eating. And pretty much when I came back home, I realized, okay, if I hadn't used the item, there would be, in some sense, no misuse of it. And then this thought deepened to a degree where I was like, I went from like seeing a plate of food, you know what I mean? Not a plate of food, like a empty plate of food that I had just left on the table, to just fathoming, if I hadn't existed, what sins would I have? And there was something interesting there. I didn't comprehend the depth, but I thought, all right, let me talk about it and see what I can notice about it. I came to this view that I pretty much realized if I hadn't existed, I wouldn't have sins. And then I thought, okay, so existence, that means what is necessary for sin is existence. That means precondition, I guess, to sin is existence, okay? And then the idea kind of deepened, and for a moment I thought, okay, so existence is not, sin is not the issue. Not that sin is not the issue, but that it's as if let's say, okay, we have the number 2, 1 plus 1 equals 5. We need the existence of the soul to have some sort of sin or good deed. I know the depth of this lecture right now. Anyways, so pretty much I've come to this view right now, that before I could sin, I needed to exist, okay? But existence, or think of it this way, existence is an opportunity to sin. Okay, it's also an opportunity to do good deeds, but for a second I was thinking, okay, what is the value of sin? Now, let's say the common view is like sin is bad, don't do it, right? And I agree with this. Sins tend to make life dimmer. Personally, I don't know how I can do this, but sometimes I could just look at people's faces, and this might sound strange, but I could look at people and I can sometimes see if there's a shadow on them. This sounds strange, but some human beings I've seen, they have shadows on them. It's like, it's even on their face. I don't know how to say it. Okay, and there's some people who I've seen who are, let's say, brighter. There was a time where this was like maybe like 2 years ago, maybe like a year ago, right? There was I went to this hotel. It was called Studio One in Dubai, and there was like this kind of like security guard, some person who was working at the door of that place, like a doorman of that place. And I would go and smoke cigarettes outside, which is not something good to do, something really unnecessary. The best time to quit cigarettes is before you smoke your first one. It's a waste of time, guys. But I remember this guy. Every time I would see him, there was like a shadow on him. Okay. And then I asked him, one day I was sitting, he came and talked, and I asked him about his, in some sense, like, life and whatnot. And he told me he was in like some military, I'm not going to name the name of the country, but he was some person in the military of a country, and he had executed someone, right? So imagine me looking at this person, seeing a shadow, and then the guy kind of like telling that story to me, right? Now, the reason I'm saying this is that perhaps, like, when we do sin, in some sense, life gets dimmer. When you do good deeds, it gets brighter. There is a sort of, I guess, light ratio to our being. Now, I have this view on sin that there was a time, I thought theologically, God, why would God, not just automate everything? Why not just the most advanced or perfect civilization right off the bat? From the beginning, why is man going through this sort of trial, for his sort of, a trial for his transcendental worth, I guess. And I came to this conclusion that the sin is necessary. Not that it's necessary to do sins, but that part of this existential game that we're in, right? There will be moments where, in some sense, there will be misunderstandings or miscalculations, or out of fear, man, in some sense, takes before he gives, and therefore destroys or disturbs, So, with this view, if somebody asks me right now, all right, what's your view on sin? I would say mathematicians sin too, okay? Somebody says, what's my view on sin? I would say that it's as if their existence is an opportunity for partnership with the Creator. There's this view that God doesn't need man. Or the Creator that needs to pray to the Creator. The Creator I see as the original power. The creation I see as a simulated power. I see theologically, at least the way I, understand it so far, is that through the theological lens, Adam and Eve, they sinned. Their sin was listening to a simulated being and forgetting the original commands of their soul. Now, what's interesting is that it has come to my attention that sometimes sin is required, to discover one's original command, right? So think of it this way: you sometimes need something bad as a reference to comprehend something good or better. And similarly, if you stop seeing just bad and good, you can see in some sense simulated and original. So in some sense, in order for us to have an awareness to the original state of being, the original power of this realm, we need to get acquainted with simulated power. Right now, human beings are getting acquainted to simulated power. And our lives are very simulated. Now, what's interesting is that even though right now we're having a simulated experience, or let me say it this way, it's like somebody, let's say we're looking at life like a video game, and the player opens its eyes in a video game where it's a bad world, everything is bad. Now the player wonders about, why am I in a bad world, you know? And when you look at human, let's say human culture, we tend to normalize things and then surpass them, in some sense get bored with them. You know, I find this to be true. So I'm saying, in the same way, you know, let's say somebody fails and then understands or appreciates the value of their success, you know, similarly, we are simulated here to comprehend the value of the original. At the same time, we, in some sense, sin to discover what is good. Now, after seeing kind of today, like, you know, when I came home and saw, like, you know, the plates I hadn't cleaned up, it kind of occurred to me that if I hadn't existed, if I had never used that plate, like, for food, it would have never gotten messy. But at the same time, I would not have the experience. I would not have the experience of the plate, you know? So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that if this might sound bizarre, but if Adam and Eve had not sinned, perhaps they would not comprehend the true value of the original commands of their being. Now, what's fascinating is that this whole world and everything observable and manifest is the creation of a being that cannot make mistakes. That's the beautiful thing about God. You know, all beings we see, they make errors, they make mistakes, have the awareness of the whole world there. You know, it is not just one world, all worlds. So what I'm trying to say here is that there was a requirement for sin initially, let's say for Adam and Eve, Prophet Adam, peace be upon him. They required that sin for the existential, for us to find ourselves in a simulation. Okay. And what I mean by that is, like, if we hadn't sinned, we would not know what this existence is. If the early, let's say, divine ancestry that had not sinned, we would not know what existence is. And we human beings are trying to do good deeds in existence. You know what I'm saying? I'm kind of noticing, in some sense, I'm not saying absolutely or accurately, but I am in some sense noticing that there required sin for us to exist, an initial sin. In some sense, it is the whole human, let's say, proposition, or the whole human expression is from a series of, sins. It is good deeds from an original place. For example, from the perspective of man, God creating man, that was good. But in some sense, Adam and Eve sinning, that was bad. Right? And what I find it very fascinating is that once God created man, imbued him with essence, created him from clay, and these are not stuff that we can understand from the logic of here, and then commanded man to say all the divine names, a pointer to the awareness of the totality of the awareness of his mind. And then all creation was commanded to bow to God's creation, except one being. And what's fascinating is that all creation bowed except one. And when that moderator, so I treat the God as the system admin beyond the world room, and in some sense the moderator, one moderator rejected, in some sense, made the sin of, or how would I say it? You see, it's like everything was perfect from the beginning. A moderator Iblis makes a sin, and Iblis's sin is the rejection of God's all-knowingness, God's greatness. Okay, and therefore it's a pointer to how a being is trying to get rid of its own higher ideal, not realizing in doing so it is denying its own validity. So in other words, God could have just, with the, let's say, single command, been like, okay, Iblis, stop existing. But at the same time, in the Holy Quran, we find that God is all merciful. Now, of course, due to the sin, Iblis is condemned to hell. But as if the punishment is given, right? But it's as if, before the. Do you know what I'm trying to say? I'm trying to say that none of this technically was necessary to happen, because the system admin could have commanded the result, the correct outcome. Do you see? That means God is this almighty, all-powerful, unconditional position of power and being, could have in some sense set the conditions that there was no challenge. It's an example would be in some sense like, what was it like somebody getting rid of all their opponents or all their challenges. By the way, guys, as I'm speaking, feel free to share your ideas. I'll engage in the chat section. I'm sort of brainstorming here. So, do you see what I'm saying? I'm saying that when I look at the original, like the story up to this point theologically, I could see that the power of the original being could have set the condition where there was no flaws. There could have been no need for an earth. There could have been no test for Adam and Eve. There could have been no moderator in some sense, or God could have commanded the moderator that went against his creation to, in some sense, realign. But it seems that these conditions were intended. Okay, now that makes it very different because human beings have the psychology of things starting from randomity, right? But it seems to be okay, no, this is a specific condition because from the beginning it could have been set differently. Do you understand? The settings of this world or solar situation could have been different. So, at least this takes away the fear aspect of it, I think, to some degree. The fear of, because we as human beings are in a unique position. We're temporarily here. In the Holy Quran, I believe it says all souls will taste death, which means all beings will in some sense die. Now, why does there need to be death? Why couldn't the outcome of the final awareness be there? Why couldn't there be a command that all beings be good? But the question comes, would human beings know what good is without soul? Would human beings know what an unimaginable is without the imaginable? Would we as beings in some sense know the all-powerful if we weren't powerless? So this kind of sets reality as if it's not designed to be perfect, it's designed to make the soul notice. In another way, I'll say it this way, that when I came back today and saw those plates of food on the table, it's, how do I say it to them? How do I tell you? It's like if I hadn't used the plate, I wouldn't see the realization of, or if, let's say, if somebody has a room, if you don't make that room messy, what would the definition of a clean room be? If you were in a clean room from the beginning, there would be no definition of clean. If we were perfect from the beginning, there would be no definition of perfection, right? So in some sense, this might sound strange, but I think the necessity, the intention of the system admin was to set the condition. So it was in some sense, how do I say it, an ingenious dualistic design, or an ingenious design where the design requires duality to become aware of, let's say, the oneness of the system admin. When I say oneness of the system admin, I do not mean everything's one. I don't mean it like Advaita philosophy and whatnot. Okay, I mean it in the sense that the unimaginable cannot be contained in the human imagination. But how would we know the unimaginable without the imaginable? How would you know if all human beings were anyways, what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that it's intention. It's intentional in the sense of what this simulation makes us aware of. If I hadn't used that plate for eating food, and then the plate getting messy and me not cleaning it right after, it's as if I wouldn't know the value of clean cutlery. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is, in some strange way, this takes away my fear. It takes my fear of the unknown, because we require the known to know the unknown, to contrast with the unknown. We require bad to be good. We require to be imperfect to be aware of what perfection is. Now, I want you, whoever you are listening, for a second, imagine if it was the opposite. That means imagine everybody was perfect, and the purpose of life was to realize we're imperfect. So right now we're in an imperfect world. Everybody has dreams of perfection. But if we were in a perfect world, would people have dreams of imperfection? I don't know. But to me, it's required. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say more and more as I exist in this world, what was valued as something random or something I couldn't correlate, I'm starting to realize that the conditional is required to notice the unconditional. And if you want to see it this way, the original power is unconditional. God is an unconditional being. Human beings are conditional beings. We have so many conditions, and perhaps we need to go through these conditions to comprehend, in some sense, the unconditional. That means sometimes maybe bad things happen for us to be like, okay, is this what good is? Or sometimes, people are rude. There was this, who was this? I don't know if it was Sadi or there was some poet, some Persian poet. They asked him, they're like, how are you so polite? He's like, buddy, I learned it from rude people. Anything they did, I did the opposite. So the person was around so many rude people that in some sense he wondered about, okay, what's another way to be? And I think human beings are set in condition, or created beings are set in a conditional position. And this might sound strange, but the value of death is in some sense a sort of contrast to notice the unconditional. But one thing I can say is that we're all on this, this specific roller coaster, right? It's as if, again, when there's this phrase, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, all praise due to the Lord of the worlds. There are many worlds. There are many worlds. This is the world we're in. And what's fascinating is that there is a sort of camaraderie I find with anything existing, here. And it's fascinating because whether you're atheist or theist, it's obvious that after this life, you're not going to to these conditions. So you must consider your life's value in regards to why am I that I wouldn't have sinned, but if I hadn't sinned, how would I notice that which is beyond it? And what sort of world would we be if we were all immortal? There's something very fascinating about going through this experience of life and wondering about what it is about developing the awareness towards. Anyways, guys, this is the view I had for today. I thought about sharing it. Let me know how you feel about, this view that if you hadn't existed, you would have no problems. For me, I'm like, yo, man, at least, sure, like existing, yeah, there's like problems, sure, there's like problems that come with it, but at least I get to see what existence is. We can be grateful for the mere fact of being somewhere, being able to notice separate relationships, being able to, in some sense, notice the difference. I find that what the soul is the awareness, the difference, you know? And why is it a mystery? Because what we consider not mysterious is found in a dualistic framework. You know, human beings to have a sort of comparative mode of understanding, you know, referential point of mode of understanding. So anyways, folks, thank you for listening, and these were the thoughts of today. In the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful. And one final thing I want to say. If we hadn't existed, we also wouldn't know what we're capable of. And you as a human being in this world, as a soul in this world, sure, there's fears, there's things that could go wrong. But the fact that you're existing, you get to see it, you understand? That means, sure, there is sin, but you get to also notice the other side. It's like holding a sword and realizing there comes a sort of double-edged responsibility of awareness with it, you know. Anyways, guys, thank you for listening. In the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful, and let me know your thoughts on this video. Thank you.